We're going to start with a clip of a discussion between a Christian and a non Christian. ADJ, the Christian, posts Isaiah 53 in the side chat and asks the non Christian who this is supposed to be about. There's a long silence in which the non Christian reads the passage, and then we get this response.
Isn't it about Jesus?
Yeah, I think so. You know when this was written?
No.
800 years before he lived.
ADJ, what's it called?
Pretty cool.
Wow, what the fuck?
Yeah, pretty cool. Can I show you another one?
The unbeliever is shocked. Shocked, I say. This must be about Jesus. So I pop up in this next bit.
Okay, this
Why is it
is
supposed to be so clear that Isaiah 53 is about Jesus?
I just ask
What,
people,
sorry?
read it, tell me who or what you think it's talking about.
I don't blame the non-Christian for giving the Jesus answer. At first glance, the passage does seem to match what the Gospels say about Jesus. However, the answer you heard was the only answer I got to the direct question I asked. After a bit of cross-talking, I zeroed in on a particular point. Yeah, so Isaiah 53, he had no beauty or majesty to attract us to him, nothing in his appearance that we should desire him. Do you think that's supposed to refer only to his physical appearance, like his face?
No, probably also in terms of his position and all that type of stuff. Like he didn't come as, a rich king or as, part of the religious leadership.
Elite. Yeah.
Oh,
Came as
there
just a
must
humble
be
servant, as a carpenter.
there must be
Mhm.
something attractive about him, right? Because you described him as the coolest person you'd ever read about.
Yeah, it's like who he was, like how he lived his life.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's something about him that
Yeah.
would make us desire him.
Yep.
Hmm.
If you think that undermines the fact, I think you're getting too literal of the fact and not understanding poetry. This is poetry
Well,
after all.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
but then
yeah.
poetry is open to a bunch of different interpretations, right? Like it doesn't
Yep,
obviously
absolutely.
mean Jesus.
Yep, I've heard people say it talks about Israel.
Hmm. Hey, have
I've
you
heard
heard
people
that?
say it also talks about Hezekiah.
Okay.
Hold on, is Isaiah 54 also written before Jesus was born?
So, really, how close is the connection between the prophecy and Jesus? ADJ gives a reason for this apparent discrepancy. It's poetry and ought not be taken too literally. Now, of course, to say this is about Jesus requires a certain sort of literalness, right? Otherwise, it could be about a wide variety of people, some of which ADJ mentions. Okay, so I want to talk for a minute about prophecy and foreknowledge in fiction. There are two genres that use foreknowledge as a trope, right? Fantasy and science fiction. In science fiction, foreknowledge is usually, but not always, about time travel. A character has beliefs about what will take place because they have access to future knowledge. In some science fiction stories, the future can be changed, right? Terminator 2 has the line, the future's not set, there's no fate but what we make. The later Terminator movies go back on this and make the rise of Skynet inevitable. Either way the science fiction story goes, the foreknowledge produces dramatic tension, which every narrative needs. Either there's a future which we can fight and change, or it's coming no matter what we do. The characters, importantly, never know which one is true, right? The rise of Skynet after the events of Terminator 2 was a surprise to the characters. In fantasy stories, the foreknowledge is usually the result of prophecies. Prophecies sometimes share the same sort of ambiguity or tension that knowledge gleaned from time travel has. The prophecy may or may not come true depending on the character's actions. Fantasy prophecies have another source of tension. They tend to be ambiguous. In the Harry Potter books, at least for much of the story, it's ambiguous whether Harry Potter or Neville Longbottom is the chosen one. And in the Song of Ice and Fire books, it's ambiguous exactly who the prince that was promised is, or even if there will be a prince that was promised. So the point is that in both science fiction and fantasy, the status of foreknowledge is geared to generating narrative tension. Okay, so what does that digression matter for biblical prophecies? Biblical prophecy is not supposed to be fiction. It's supposed to be actual information about the future. So, why does it share ambiguity with fictional prophecies? One answer relates to the broad issue of God's hiddenness. God doesn't want the prophetic links to be so clear that no faith is involved. Okay, that's one answer. But that's just an admission that these prophecies are not necessarily about Jesus. When an apologist just gestures at them the way ADJ did, they're playing a bit of a trick on you. They're expecting you to not think too much about the details. And when you ask about the details, they're dismissed because the prophecy is obviously about Jesus. And the details are just details. So whenever biblical prophecies come up in a conversation, it's always worth asking why they're ambiguous, right? Because fictional prophecies are ambiguous because they need narrative tension. Does God need narrative tension? Maybe we'll talk about that again in the future.